Live on WFLA Now. This is Run for Fun with running enthusiast Leigh Spann.
All right, welcome back to the Stream Center for this week's episode of Run for Fun. We hope this show reminds all of us that as important as training can seem to us, it is what we do as a hobby. And it's important to make sure that it remains enjoyable and, yes, even fun. And if you're starting out to run a little more consistently, don't get bogged down in all these details. Again, we want you to have fun. I'm your host, Leigh Spann. I'm a meteorologist at WFLA in Tampa. But I've also been running for more than about 14 years now, and there have been plenty of times where I have let training take over my life, but I am working on that. So this podcast, this digital show is for me as much as it is anyone else. And joining me, of course, is my coach, Coach Maria, who has to not only keep me sane, but all of her clients sane throughout all of our training cycles.
It's always a good reminder for me too, Leigh.
Yeah.
All of us need the reminder.
Because, you think you're never going to be that person when you first start.
Yeah.
And then you start training, it can easily sort of take over everything, and it can be. Yeah. So we're just like, remember that it is fun.
I actually had to go for counseling for this issue. Like I had to pay somebody to make my head right. And it was mostly on what we're going to talk about today, data. So sometimes you can get bogged down really easily. You got to keep an eye on it.
Yes. Remember, it is what we do for fun. All right. So got a couple of housekeeping things. Obviously, if you've kept up with any of the national news, or if you live here in the Tampa Bay area, you know that it has been real tough in Tampa Bay and along the coast of West Central Florida with Helene flooded everything. And so we had last week's show, or 2 weeks ago now, the show was about running after a disaster. Little did we know then that we were setting up for yet another disaster that was going to come through. So, we just kind of want to let people, to just help out your neighbor. That's all we can really do.
Yeah. I mean, after Helene, I came and got a group together, and we literally just posted in the Facebook group on Davis Island and said, does anybody need help? And people actually said they needed help. And so we brought people to help. And really with the debris cleanup and all that stuff, we really just need to help our neighbor. It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff on the street. Still some people without power, although getting better.
Getting better. We had a big group. It went from about 200, 100. Anyway, this morning, we're taping this on Tuesday, the 15th. In Hillsborough County, it just went under 100,000. And that was just like, oh, yay.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty fast for all things considered. But just ask your neighbor if they need help. Ask them if you have power, ask them if they want to come over and take a shower. Taking a shower is a big deal. It really does make you feel a little bit better.
Okay. I let people, I've had 2 different sets of people come through to do laundry. Because you forget all the things that actually do run on power. Your hot water heater, your hot water, your water heater. And so then, very quickly you run out of hot water. And then, so many things run off power. And you just can't, even if you have a generator, you're not going to use that for your washing machine, know?
So just help your neighbors out and be kind and have grace with yourself and with others.
Yes.
People are stressed. People do things crazy when they're stressed out. So
especially when supplies were limited, there was limited supplies of gas. So I saw someone post on their social media that they could, without power, like the 3rd or 4th day, they're like, I can actually hear marriages ending out there because it was hard.
And it was funny enough, Luke actually last week, he had a COVID flashback.
Yeah,
he was
a little bit.
Oh my gosh, this is triggering me. I'm like, oh gosh, it's fine. It's going to be fine. But a lot of things came up when things were canceling and things, everything's been canceled. And so it can bring up some stuff. So have grace with yourself, have grace with others, help out. I know complaining does happen sometimes. Try to limit it because complaining doesn't help. It's never going to help you. It's not going to help you feel better.
No. So speaking of all things being canceled, the Leigh Spann Farewell 5K Run for Fun has officially been canceled by the city. So the Al Lopez Park, where we were going to have it on this Sunday, October 20th, sustained a good amount of damage. When I talked to the city yesterday, they said it basically weeks before they're like, the park got hit really hard. So we know we won't be having a traditional 5K on Sunday, October 20th at Al Lopez Park. So for all the people who have signed up, we're going into a meeting right after we finish this to try to figure out how we're going to move forward. But I certainly appreciate all the people who did sign up. It was a good thought that I could get to have a farewell run for fun 5K. So hopefully we can do it in some sort of,
Well,
altered way.
instead you got a farewell couple of hurricanes.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, nobody was going to let you out with a bang, without a bang.
Yeah.
Leigh, right?
It was. Yes, I would have done. I would have been much happier with a 5K. much happier with a 5K.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway, so that is. So those are sort of the housekeeping things. Stay tuned throughout the week. We're going to tell you, how we're going to transition this, or if it, or what we're going to do for it. Just what did
We'll come up with something fun.
We will.
Even if it's Strava, we can come up with something.
Yes. So thank you to everyone again who did register, and we were all looking forward to it. As Maria said, for the next couple of weeks too, if you're looking at the data on your smartwatch, which people have their Apple Watches, and a lot of the runners use Garmin. What are some of what's the other one?
Coros.
Coros, yeah.
That's a new one. People seem to really like it, but pretty much Garmin holds the market in this arena.
Yeah. And it gives you a lot of data. And right now, just so you know, everything's going to be a little out of whack because if you've been dealing with 2 hurricanes in 2 weeks. So but before we had the second hurricane, this was what we had planned to talk about. So it's still important. You're still going to be moving forward, and then you're going to be looking at this data, and you're going to think, is this right? Is this wrong? Is this crazy? Is this, so we're going to go through some of them, and we're going to have Coach talk about what she sees. So just so everyone knows, I wear my Garmin, and I wear it all the time, and I run with it. And then when I sync it to a separate app, you can see it. So you know all of my data.
Yep. Everything that you see on your watch, I get to see too.
Right. So I can't interpret it, but I know that she's out there looking at it. So we'll start with the one that, is the, I guess, the more straightforward. The pace. Mm-hmm. It's going to tell you how fast you ran, throughout the entire run that you did. And, if you slowed down, if you sped up. So what is, when you see the pace, what do you see? What does that matter?
Okay, so actual pace, I really wish Garmin would take off the watch. Actual pace is not ever accurate, and a lot of people put actual pace on their watch. It's not, it has to go up to a satellite and back down. By the time it gets back down, it's not accurate. So you always want to have your watch set on lap average. That will give you, the lap is a mile. Typically, you can change that lap, but it's best to keep it at a mile. And then it will average your lap after a quarter mile. It takes a quarter mile to do it. So I always tell people, try not to get crazy about your pace the first quarter mile. I don't even look at my watch for the first quarter mile of a run. This is exactly how it looks like to me on a screen. And really the only thing I'm looking for is consistency and pace. When I look at consistency, I look at how if you're warming up properly. Typically what I see with a lot of new runners is they always go out too fast when they're running, and so they just, 2 things happen. They kind of blow their wad.
Yeah.
Well, and then they can't finish their run. That happens. Or they just feel really bad at the end of their run, which we never want to feel bad at the end of actually really any training run. Of course, we will have an occasional outlier where we feel really bad, but for the most part, we should be in control of our pace and how we operate our bodies. And that's what the Garmin does help with, kind of getting a feel for that sort of thing. The other thing I see is people doing negative splits. Once they learn how to do negative splits, they negative split everything. And so then they're like, oh my gosh,
is that not the goal?
It's like a fast finish every single run. And I'm like, okay, guys, it doesn't have to be a negative split every single run. Although it's good, it doesn't have to be, to the point of especially an easy run. Mm-hmm. It can just be generally 10:30 pace and staying at 10:30 pace. Or sometimes you have a harder day and you'll do a little bit faster 1 mile and then you feel lousy the next mile and you slow down and then you feel faster. That's okay. To go with how you're feeling. But it just gives us an idea of what pace we're doing and how we're running. And that's very helpful.
And how often should I be looking down at my wrist? Because I feel like I look at it constantly while running. Is that a problem?
Well, I hope my husband doesn't listen to this podcast because I would say
the advice I would give, do as I say.
The advice I would give is that you should probably not look at your watch on an easy run very much.
Okay.
I sometimes will wear a Timex watch just if I'm getting a little crazy, and we'll talk about that later in the show. But if I get a little crazy and I feel like I'm getting a little out of control, like I will wear my Timex. But then my husband runs with me, so he's like my emotional support Garmin runner.
How fast are we going? How fast are we going?
But what he's crazy. Like he won't, when it beeps at the mile marker, he won't even look. And I'm like,
how do you not look?
Yeah. Yesterday I was like, it beeped. I'm like, what was it? And he's like, I thought we weren't caring about our base today. And he's like, I really just wasn't even thinking about it. I'm like, well, what was it? And it's just funny. Like, you really shouldn't look at your watch, but it's hard when you have it there and you just want to know, like, am I doing things correctly?
Right. Yeah. And it can, yes. And so, so if you're
like, your body won't tell you, but your body will tell you.
All right. So pace is important, but, and if you're doing workouts, that's a whole different, you can set your time, you can lap it yourself. You can set Garmin training things. And so in those cases, yes, if you have a set pace you're supposed to be running, you should try to reach
and even when you have a set pace, the biggest mistake I see, and still a lot of my experienced runners still do this. If I have a pace range and it's like 8:10 to 8:20, almost always you should come in that first interval slower than 8:20. Like almost always, just to be cautious. Instead, people attack the pace and like coach says 8:10 to 8:20, which means I'm going to do 8:09 because coach is going to think I'm amazing. And the reality is, like, depending on the day, the reason I give you a range is because you're more tired on some days, and it doesn't have to be a very specific thing. It's not like attack this pace and then you're going to be Shalane Flanagan, even though people think that. Always be cautious, like always kind of sneak up on a pace. That's what I like to say. Sneak up. Surprise yourself.
Surprise. All right. So that's one thing that is sort of the baseline of what these Garmin started. Because when I first got my first Garmin, like the Forerunner 100 or something like that, all it did, it didn't sync.
Is that the big one, the really big one on your wrist?
Yeah, and it didn't sync to the internet. It just allowed me to know how fast I was going. So that was like the basic thing that Garmin first offered.
Yeah, and it's so funny because back then, I think that was like around 2000. Was it 8 or 9?
Yeah, I was going to say it was close because I started in 09. It was my first run. So yeah.
Well, I'd been running since 98 with nothing, and I was coaching, and I was like, all of my runners were getting this big thing on their wrist, and I was like, I'm never getting that. That is so dumb. That's going to ruin everything. You can do everything with a Timex. You can listen to your body. And then they bought me my first Garmin, my run group. They were like, Coach, you have to have a Garmin. Everybody has a Garmin. And now I'm addicted to my Garmin.
Here you are. But
but it has made coaching a lot easier. I used to coach by feel entirely. I do think there's a place, and I do give it to you guys. Feel, especially in the summer, a lot. Feel is important. We always want to graduate to feel. Use the Garmin to graduate to feel. But when you're a beginner runner, it's actually very helpful to know what you're doing and know how you're doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go on. We'll move on to the next one. All right. So going along with speed, we also have cadence. We've talked about this before in a couple of, with form drills and things like that. So cadence is just quite literally how many times your feet hit the ground in a minute, right?
In a minute. Yep. I can see it all as long as you have that feature on your watch. It is pretty accurate. It's more accurate if you have a foot pod. They do have foot pods that you can put in. But it's pretty accurate.
Okay.
And your easy run should be a little slower of a cadence. It usually should be like around 170. And then this would be a perfect easy run. If I saw it, I'd be like, oh, okay. Maybe if you walk a little bit, your cadence will be off, obviously. Like if you're walking your recoveries, your cadence will be different. So you don't want to look at that average if you're walking because your average will be off. But when you're doing a workout, your goal should be like around 180 for the workout portion of it. And yeah, that's just making sure that you're keeping your foot strike under your hips. That will help.
Kicking out in front.
Yep.
Because people think that when you're striding really hard, like you're kicking out and you're sort of lifting up. But the way that it was finally able to sink into my brain, as someone said, that you're only getting thrust forward if you have a foot on the ground. So when
Yes.
you're in the air gliding, like with this long stride with both feet off the ground, you're not going forward. You're not pushing yourself forward anymore. So
Yeah.
you want as
And if
many
you have
times your foot on the ground.
If you have a long stride and your foot's out in front and your heel is up, which is typically what happens when you're in a long strider, you're breaking yourself.
That's not great.
So because your body has to hit the ground at the heel first, and you're going backward, then you have to thrust yourself forward again. So that's just not efficient. So the shorter stride is actually better. So if you're struggling with cadence, you can work on your cadence a little bit. I usually use a metronome with my clients. I, put it at the end of their run and say, hey, just try to keep that. Because the thing is, when you put 180 cadence and you typically run too fast, because it's really hard to run slow. But the best way to do it is to like march in place at 180 for a little bit and then just gently move forward. Okay. And that keeps you going easy for your easy run.
So that's cadence. Thanks, Garmin, for having that for us. All right, now we have heart rate. And
Yes.
We've had an entire podcast about keeping your heart rate, low and not spiking it. So, how accurate is a thing that's on my wrist? Do you think that it's good information?
I mean, all of this is good information.
Yeah.
I will say that it's not super, super accurate. And so as long as you use it as a tool, and like I always say, if people go, for instance, if you get your body fat checked, it doesn't really matter where you go to get your body fat checked to make sure that it's perfect. If you go to the same place every time, you can see patterns.
Yeah.
And you can see that it's either going up or it's going down. So don't get so caught up in the number, get caught up in looking at the whole picture. When I'm looking at data, I'm looking for outliers. I'm not looking for, like, I really scan everything and I'm like, oh, this is consistent to this person. This is consistent to this person. Oop, this person might be getting sick. Oop, this person might have worked a little too hard.
Which she will do. She's like, are you okay? Are you feeling sick? I'm like, I am. She knows from my data.
Yeah, your heart rate will be higher on an easy run if you're getting sick. Sometimes if you're not recovering well, your heart rate will be higher for longer days. I look for that. Like after a hard workout, if the heart rate is elevated more than a day, I'm like, oh, we might need to work on nutrition, or somebody might be getting sick, or that was too hard of a workout. Those sorts of things. I'm looking for outliers. I'm not looking for, every single thing to be perfect, because that's not even accurate. But the wrist heart rate is pretty accurate if on an easy run. It is not accurate at all on the track.
Oh, that's good to know.
Unless you're doing an interval over an 800, because it takes a long time for your heart rate to like register correctly and to get that high heart rate on the track. So I would prefer people to not look at heart rate. I don't really like you to look at heart rate on a track workout anyway. I prefer heart rate. I like heart rate for an easy run. I like heart rate for like a tempo run in the summer is a good time to use a heart rate, because pace and tempo in the summer is just, you might as well hang that up. But yeah, heart rate is funny because, and the Garmin, there's lots of different, I'm going to try to say this without getting too technical, but there's lots of different ways to come up with heart rate. Like we have heart rate, different formulas that different people have created for what is good for heart. And you can actually set your Garmin to all three of those different things at different times. Oh. Most people don't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Percentage of max heart rate. You can set it to max heart rate. You can set it, there's three different formulas.
So if your heart rate gets to a certain point, it'll beep at you to say like, slow down? Is that what the idea is?
Basically, each one sets up your heart rate zones differently.
Oh, I see. Your heart rate zones. Okay, we'll get into that next, but the zones.
So your zones are they're different based on which formula you have plugged into your Garmin.
Got it. Okay.
Which one you want to use is dependent on who you are. I like to use max heart rate.
Okay. I don't even know what mine is set on, because we'll see.
Most people don't know their max heart rate. You wouldn't know your max heart rate unless you're watching. If you're running a 5K all out in good weather, I would say the last 5 minutes of your 5K, add 5 beats. That's probably close to your max heart rate. Okay. And then the reason why we want to know heart rate, because heart rate tells you how hard you're working. It's a very good indicator of if you're recovering, if you're not recovering, if you're in the right zones. Where we get in trouble is when we get too crazy about heart rate. Like some people will say zone 2, you can only run zone 2 heart rate when you're running easy. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to run zone 2, especially in the summer. So a lot of coaches, me in particular, I like to use zone 2 pace, which is different. That's based on your time that you run a 5K in, and the pace adjustments that we use in the summer. It's a little bit more accurate than heart rate. So there's just a lot that goes into heart rate, and what I'm like, people get so crazy. Like if you don't drink coffee and you drink coffee a day, it can bring your heart rate up 10 beats. If you drink alcohol at all, your heart rate's going to be up 10 beats the next day.
If you talk
when you're running, which we all do, your heart rate's going to be higher. There's so many things that are involved in your heart rate. So you really just can't get too caught up. You just really want to look for outliers, and especially in your resting heart rate. Yeah. Your resting heart rate will really tell you more than, Yeah.
So what is it, the difference between, it says aerobic and anaerobic as far as your heart rate is concerned?
I mean, you're working harder.
With the anaerobic.
Yeah. Anaerobic is harder. Anaerobic is a speed workout. So you want to, I like people in their easy runs to at the very least be in the green. You want to be in the green. If you're now listen, if you don't have your Garmin set up correctly, you're always going to be in the orange. Yeah. So don't come at me. But like, if you really want to pay attention to your heart rate, the test I like to do is you warm up, then you do an 800 at like 90% effort. You take a 1 minute break, and then you do an 800 at all out effort, and you should pretty much get your max heart rate by doing that. It's a miserable test to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds awful.
I've done it one time. My good friend Brian Fulham got me to do that, and my max heart rate is actually 200. And heart rate is genetic, so I have a higher resting heart rate too. Like my resting heart rate is usually like, in really good shape, I'm 50 to 55. Yeah. Right now I'm like 55 to 60, which is pretty good shape. But most people like that run as much as I do genetically would be in the 40s.
Yeah, definitely.
But I just have a higher heart rate. So I do things differently. And everybody's is so different. Yeah. That's why when they say 220 minus your age, I'm like, oh, here we go. That's like BMI,
Right. It works for the, again,
for the general population,
yes.
It's great. But for runners, it's very different because we train our heart at such a higher rate. And we were talking about on the track last night, Cheryl was saying, she's like, it took me a little while to realize that I could let my heart rate get high and I was going to be okay. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to be okay if you push yourself. It's not the end of the world.
She is a nurse. So yes. All right. So these are the zones we were talking about. So again, so mine is set up with these beats per minute, but you're saying that I can change that to do the other.
Yeah. The others, that's not that accurate for you actually. Okay. But yeah, like if you're stressed, when did you do this? Which day was this?
It was before. It was between Helene and Milton.
So I would say this, and this was an easy run, or was it
easy run? I believe.
Yeah. Actually, I got Michelle Panetta. You should listen to this podcast today because you asked me this question, and hers looked just like this. But yeah, if you're stressed, you're going to be in zone 4 almost always. Like you're just going to be. And actually, I was running with Cecilia this morning, and she told me that she said, during the hurricane, I just did intervals. Like I did for my easy run, 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, because I just couldn't get my heart rate under control because of the stress and the anxiety. And I'm like, yes. And it is really important. Like we talked about last time with the hurricane, you got to be careful of that because it's indicative that your heart is working harder than it should be working. So you got to pay attention to that.
Because you were saying that heart rate is a measure of how hard you're working.
Yep.
Which you may think, well, I'm running a 12-minute mile, I'm not working very hard. Well, clearly your body is working hard.
Yes.
If your heart rate is up, even though the pace isn't what you think it should be, your body is working.
And this is what we were talking about last time about how you know, if you're going through a stressful life change or a divorce or a death in the family or a move, that stuff does affect your heart rate because your body is stressed out. If you have teenagers, like I literally was having this conversation the other day about heart rate and teenagers. I was like, I just got to a point that I just didn't want to train for a marathon because it was taking so much out of me to parent that I didn't want to put myself through the other stress.
Yeah.
And there are times that you have to like look at that. And that's mostly because my heart rate was just like every day out of control. Like, so you do have to take it into consideration. That's when we care about this stuff, right? Like it's
Because if you're up there in 4 and 5 all the time, you're going to break down.
It's okay. It's not like if it's a couple days, it's not a big deal. It's the chronic stuff we're looking towards. Like if the move is taking too long or you're in a stressful period of life for 6 months, like 1 or 2 weeks, just be a little careful. But if it's prolonged, you're going to hurt yourself, and we don't want to do that.
And then we have the dreaded thing that it is memes on the internet that your watch tells you you're being unproductive, and your watch is telling you all the the Garmin will say you're being unproductive today. You must be in recovery today. Hey, you're maintaining or you are productive. People get real upset at their watch.
Oh man, it's probably the one thing that I probably type out on Facebook and then erase. I mean, I can tell you I do it. So I see that on a screen and people put it on, oh, I was too slow today. I'm like, that's not what unproductive means.
So let's talk about what unproductive does mean then.
Yeah. So unproductive actually typically means that you're under recovered for the workout. So it typically means you ran too fast on a day that you shouldn't have run. Now, your Garmin can say that you're unproductive all summer long for that reason. Mm-hmm. Just because the dew point is too high. And even though Garmin has come up with a way to put dew point in there, did you notice that? I don't think so. In the last model, they now put temperature and dew point.
Oh, that is very helpful because it matters a lot.
Yes, it does. But their algorithm is still can't figure out genetically who's better in heat and who's not better in heat. And so still it's better to go by feel. But I will say they're working on it, so that's cool. But I can't tell you how many runners are like the first cold front. They're like, my watch says I'm productive and I'm in so much better shape. I'm like, you're in the same shape today that you were in yesterday. It's just the weather changed. Yes. So it's funny when people do that. But people post up and they say, oh, I didn't work hard enough. And I'm like, no, you actually worked too hard. And you wasted the workout. And now you're showing everybody on social media that you're incompetent at reading your watch. So let's not do that.
So should we care at all about if we see unproductive or recovery?
We should.
Okay, we should care.
What you should care about with unproductive is your recovery. If you're seeing that a lot, then you need more recovery, which means you need to either run easier on your easy days, you need to eat more, you need to sleep more, and you want to try to avoid that unproductive. You don't want to have it on your watch. That's like the least fun one. Recovery is usually if you've taken some time off, it'll tell you recovery. And depending on the situation, you might need the recovery. Yeah. You know, if it's a recovery week, it should probably say recovery.
Or because I think mine does it like on the day I have a rest day.
Yeah.
Or, like I think it'll say recovery, but the next time I talk, so it comes up like as like 1 or 2 days or whatever. And you can see September 27th and 29th on this recovery because I didn't run for 3 days during Halloween.
Yep.
So it just says, okay, I guess you're recovering.
It will tell you actually, it takes like a week and it'll start to say detraining. You've probably,
After a marathon, it'll tell me I'm detraining.
Detraining, that'll tell you. And that's pretty accurate actually. Those things are pretty accurate. Maintaining is pretty accurate. That means you're maintaining. It means you're staying steady, and that's good. I'm trying to think what else do the performance condition. Some of the Garmins have performance.
Okay, I don't have that one.
Okay, that'll go like it goes to -20 and it goes up to 20.
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't. Yes. So that one is the weirdest thing.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I know if I'm running really fast, it'll tell me like a +3 or +4. Mm-hmm. but like sometimes it'll give me a +3 when I'm running easy, and when I'm running fast, it'll give me a negative number. I'm like, I don't think this means anything.
Yeah. So basically it's looking at your recovery and it's looking at your heart rate. So, and the funny thing is, I used to think it was pretty accurate until one summer was in Maine, and we lived in the highest point in Maine, in Freeport, Maine. And so I always had to run downhill for the first start of my run. And it would give me like a 15 performance condition because I started my run. I'm like, oh, it doesn't know I'm going downhill. So yeah, you have to be careful of that too. And I shut that off. And the reason I shut that off is because that can really mess with your head. If it tells you that you're a -7, maybe because your heart rate is too high because you have some anxiety before your race, and then you think that you're not going to run well, and then you don't run well. So I would say you can keep it on your watch, but don't. If it's near a race, I would take it off. Okay. It's not worth it.
Right. And then you mentioned this earlier, the heart rate, active heart rate, I guess, and then versus the resting heart rate. So we talked about the other one already. So this one, I think I did over time. I'm not sure. I did a week, maybe a week. Anyway, but so that blue line is the resting heart rate. Mm-hmm. And so what are you looking for in that? And what does that mean? Like when I'm just sitting around, it's my heart rate.
Yep. And it tells me how you're recovering. It tells me that you're healthy or not healthy. One thing I learned the other day that I didn't know, and I was shocked to hear this, and it was very interesting. If you are underfueled, like if you have low energy availability, your resting heart rate will actually take a nosedive because your body is protecting itself from working too much. And so you could think that you have a really low heart rate and you might not be eating enough. Okay. So that's one thing where I say, if you see a jump in either direction, like if you are in the middle of a training cycle and you're getting ready for a marathon, you should see it gradually come down. Mine will go from like 58 to like 53 over the course of like 12 or 15 weeks. But if you see it go from like 60 to like 52 immediately, you're like, ooh, something's not right.
Body's protecting itself.
Yeah. And you can tell it's so interesting because your body is so smart. Your body will start leaning on things. If this is you'll start leaning on things, not wanting to stand up. Your motions in your hands will stop. Your body will stop that stuff because it's trying to conserve energy. So pay attention. Like that's a good way to tell if you're in low energy availability. Right. And then the other thing is, if you jump 10 high, that typically means you're sick.
Okay.
You're about to get sick. So a lot of times, if it jumps 10 higher, I'll be like, ooh, if I have a workout, I'll be like, I'm just going to run easy today. It's just better to be safe than sorry. Some elite runners, if their heart rate is that high before a race, they won't do the race. They'll just say, you know what? Nope, today's not the day. Some, not all, but yes.
That takes a lot of discipline, a lot.
Well, they know like if they get paid to perform.
And they perform poorly.
Yeah. They'd rather jump in another race when they're healthy. So
see, we can learn.
We
things.
don't do that.
We don't do that.
So you can just run easier or skip the day or change the workout to a different day. That's fine.
All right, calories. So this is not what I'm taking in. This is what I am using. So one of the things that kind of blew my mind is that on every day resting, I am using, according to my Garmin, 1,609 calories. It's always 09. So it's like, I don't know if that's supposed to change, but in the last couple of months, I was looking back. I'm like, oh, I don't even know that I'd ever really looked at it. So I need at least 1,600 calories to sit and do nothing.
Yes. Yeah. That's based on your weight and your height. Kind of accurate.
Okay.
Not super accurate. Okay.
I was wondering if that was
It's not. Yeah. Okay. It's not super accurate. In order for that to be accurate, you'd have to do like a metabolic test.
Okay.
And your metabolism is always changing. So it can regulate, it can adapt to whatever you're doing. So if you adapt your metabolism to a ton of miles and low food, then your metabolism slows down. So our metabolism, we don't want that. So you want to keep eating properly to keep your systems working correctly. It's a good measure, right? Like it gives you a good idea of what you need to eat, because you would, based on that, probably want to be eating 23 to 2,400 calories a day based on what you do for activity to maintain.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of calories.
That is a lot.
Yeah. People don't realize that that's a lot of calories, but it is. We ask our bodies to do a lot. The other thing to that is, like, when it tells you the calories that you burned running, that's not accurate either. And it's mostly not accurate because the more efficient you get, the less calories you burn. We're training our bodies to burn less calories. So
and that is true. So we're actually, we are training our bodies
yes,
to, okay.
that's what we're doing.
It's not just showing up on our watch that way. It is actually happening. Okay.
We are doing that. It's typically like 100 calories every 10 minutes, roughly.
Back when we didn't have Garmin, we said about 100 calories every 10 minutes.
And I'm going to blow your mind and also tell you that the nutrition labels are 20% off too. So it's all like, people think it's all so accurate when the reality is, like, it's just appears to be that accurate. It's not that accurate. So try not to get too caught up in it. Again, I would say listen to your body. Your body will tell you if you're not eating enough or you're working too hard. It immediately will tell you.
Yeah. And
it just feels off.
And I know that in times in past, and for women specifically, you ignore those cues. Those cues that means it, at some points that was like, that's good. I feel hungry all the time. Like, that means I'm not, there are cues that you either ignore or actually celebrate, which are detrimental.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, I don't ever have to push people. Like, I know people think, oh, coach, you probably yell at people. No, actually, I have to tell people to chill out. Yeah. I pull people back. I say, listen to those signals, because we are trained to, like, runners as in general, that's what we have to do, is to ignore those things to do what we're doing, because it's uncomfortable to run long distances. Yeah. That's hard. So we have to train ourselves to be tough in that way. But you got to find that, you got to ride that balance again of listening to the Garmin and don't listen to the Garmin. I literally, like, I'm not joking when I say I had to go to counseling for this, and that the counselor told my husband to hide my watch for 3 months because I had so much data going on in my brain that I could not shut off, that I couldn't just run anymore. And it was like, the counselor's like, you're never going to perform well if you are too data oriented, because our bodies don't work like that. We're not a machine like that. There's just so many things and so many different days, and you can have the most perfect training cycle ever and have a crappy race, and then you can have the worst training cycle ever and BQ, and it's just luck sometimes, like what your body's capable of doing on that day.
And no amount of data is going to make
no amount of data is going to make you be able to do what you want to do. And sometimes it forces us to push a little harder than we should. A lot of times. I mean, and even with the sleep data, do you have sleep on here?
Yes, let's see. I think that might be next. Yeah, good job. Look at you.
Yeah.
So this was one night, 7 hours of sleep, 2 times up with the dog. So there's only 2 awake times, and I do fall right back asleep when I get up, let her out, and come back.
That's pretty good. That looks pretty good, actually. Sleep data is, again, not super accurate, but again, we're looking for trends. Mm-hmm. So if you're sleeping 7 hours and 4 minutes a night and you're staying on that trend, what sleep score was that? Do you know?
I don't know.
I don't know. It'll give you a sleep score. Interestingly enough, I actually have a Tempur-Pedic bed. I have, like, one of the fancy ones because I know how important sleep is. And it does this for me, and I wear my watch, and it's totally different than on my watch.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that funny? So, it'll be like the sleep score will be 10 off. And I do think my bed's a little bit more accurate. My bed can give me my resting heart rate, which is kind of crazy. Yeah.
But what you're saying is, if my Garmin says that I'm getting this amount of sleep, and I'm getting whatever that is,
and you're getting a sleep score, just say if it's 80.
Yeah.
If it's 80 every time, good.
Yeah.
Like you want your sleep score to be above 80. But if it starts to trend down, you're like, oop, I got to work on my sleep hygiene a little bit. I got to be better we did a whole show on that, on how to keep your, sleep better. But again, per my watch and my counselor, it became obsessive, and I was having anxiety about sleeping and about my sleep score in the morning. And then I was not sleeping well. So, like, I know it sounds like I'm crazy, but I look at data all day. That's what I do. And so people want to know more information from me a lot of times, and I'm very careful about it because I'm like, okay, I've spent all this time like now unwiring my brain to like stop thinking through counseling. And I want you guys to be able to go and have fun and run and not worry about it. I'm like, you guys don't worry. I worry. Like when I worry, then we can worry. There's very few times we actually have to worry. So like, you know, just kind of keep it. Don't get too caught up in it. Don't try to. My engineers, they get too caught up.
Yes, a lot of us are type A.
Yes.
All right. So I think this might be the last one, maybe. So VO2 max, explain what that is and why it's important, or if it's not important, or if it's good, or if it's bad. Or...
Yeah, it's about oxygen uptake. It's very genetic, how much oxygen you can take in at a time to fuel your muscles. It's genetic. You can't really do much with your VO2 max. Like you can change it a little bit. I'm not saying that you shouldn't.
By just being a consistent runner, consistent exerciser.
Mostly just doing some very, very hard workouts on the track. You can. But the most bang for your buck is in threshold. And it is the most untapped thing that runners use. And threshold pace is like the pace that you can hold for an hour, which typically for most of us would be a little bit slower than our 10K pace. For elite runners, it's like half marathon pace. It is the most bang for your buck in terms of getting faster. That's how you improve the most. That's how you can run faster for longer. It's energy metabolism. It's how, and people just don't want to run it because it almost feels not hard enough. You see, like we did a threshold workout today on the track, and we did 1 lap at 10K pace, 1 lap floating recovery, which is a minute faster than your easy run, 1 lap 10K, 1 lap floating. So you did a whole mile, but you only did those 2 harder efforts, and that kept your heart rate at threshold. And everybody loved the workout. They're like, it's just so easy, coach. That was so easy. I'm like, yeah, tempo shouldn't feel like you're dying. Like it should.
Also, the weather was a little bit nicer than it was been all summer long. But on top of that, it was also not, it wasn't, you're not killing yourself out there.
And people think, oh, if I didn't max effort my track workout, then I'm not getting the benefits. And the reality is that's so inaccurate. It's so inaccurate because the reality is getting physically fit requires you to hold back. And so if our goal is to get physically fit, we shouldn't be going to the well every single track workout. And that's where, like, if you really want to pay attention to your heart rate on the track, a chest strap will tell you accurately what you're doing on the track. The only time I will say get a chest strap is if you are doing those harder intervals and you want to make sure you're not going to the well every single time. You want to make sure you're just holding back a little bit. That can be more accurate, the chest strap.
I probably won't be doing that.
Yeah. It's not necessary for what we're doing because, I mean, if you're training your mile or you're training your 800 or then you have to do those workouts. Right. But if you're doing a 5K, that's all endurance. That's aerobic capacity, tons of zone 3 in the bank, tons of zone 2, the occasional zone 4. And then occasionally you're throwing in some zone 5. Yeah. Occasional. Yes. Like when I say occasional, once every 6 to 8 weeks. We're not doing it like every week.
Let's see. So, this is one I don't really understand with Garmin. It says a stress level, and it's like, oh, you had enough restful moments, or you didn't have enough restful moments. And
I actually do not know much about this.
Yeah, it never obviously, if I've been up and around all day, it'll say you didn't have enough restful moments. I'm like, well, I wasn't stressed. I just wasn't sitting a lot.
I don't actually know much about this one. I'd have to do a little bit of research on the stress. I don't even look at it on mine. I feel like I know when I'm stressed. Yeah. I don't need my Garmin telling me when I'm stressed.
And just moving around doesn't necessarily mean I'm stressed. That's what. So I'm always like, I don't know what that means. So that's good.
Well,
I won't worry about it too much.
Not enough restful moments would be maybe not breathing. I mean, not breathing properly. Mm-hmm. Like HRV, we haven't talked about that, but HRV is. You don't have that on your watch?
I don't know. Maybe
heart rate variability.
I don't know. Maybe I do.
That's what the Oura Ring uses mostly. And Whoop uses that a lot. Yeah. And actually it's pretty accurate. And it's your breath rate when you sleep. Like, are you getting enough breathing? And is like, if your endocrine system is like in overdrive, you'll take shorter breaths than you should. So it's kind of like a warning, like, hey, your endocrine system may be on overload. Cool it.
So that just means you're stressed.
You're stressed.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if Garmin used something like that, but I don't know. I know it does have heart rate variability.
Yeah.
Mine has heart rate variability, and that's also very genetic. So don't compare.
Okay.
Like my heart rate variability is like 32 or 33. And like, if somebody looked at that, they would be like, oh, Maria, that's not good. But actually genetically, that's fine for me. Okay. It's very consistent.
So you're just looking for, most things you are just looking for the outliers. As long as it's the same.
And consistency. Yeah. A lot of times and actually like the Apple Watch will even tell you if there's an outlier. That's how it tells you, like when it's looking at your heart rate, it'll say, hey, you're an AFib, or you should go to the doctor. Or they've been known to,
warn people
detect
that,
heart attacks.
Yeah.
Whoop, actually, they were detecting COVID before COVID. We had COVID tests. They were doing it based on people's HRV on their Whoop strap. It was crazy. Like golfers were finding out about it from their Whoop strap.
So what is a Whoop strap?
It's the same thing as the Oura Ring.
Okay.
You know the Oura Ring that people wear, and it's basically for recovery. It's funny because I've thought about buying the Whoop strap a million times because I think it's so cool. But
you love your data.
Yeah, but it's just not good for me. But I'm like, I've seen people quit alcohol because of their Whoop strap, because their Whoop strap will be like, no, you can't run today. And it'll be like, why? Your heart rate's way too high. And they're like, oh, it had to have been the alcohol, and they want to run more. So it's really interesting when people start looking into recovery. It's interesting. The data does kind of help them with that.
Well, if you see what it's doing to your body, I can see it. I can see.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move to the coach's drill. This one is very special to you. All right, so just run with a Timex. What about all this data?
I love me some data, but I also will tell you that when you're racing, don't pay attention to your data. Your data will tank your race performance pretty quickly if you let it. And with a Timex, you just don't know. Like I would use it, and I would hit the lap manual at each mile marker when I did a marathon with my Timex, and it just kept me in the mile. It kept me more relaxed. And I if I saw that I had a slower mile, I would say, oops, just the mile markers are off. And you can't do that with a Garmin, but they could do that on a race course. The mile markers could be off. I've seen it happen numerous times. Whereas if you have a Garmin and you have a bad mile, you're like, I'm about to tank. I'm about to not be able to do it. And you could just have a bad mile. So if you are an anxiety person, try to run by feel and not run with a Garmin. I know it's hard, but please try.
So would you say that specifically for races, or should you if you're running a workout, or if you're running an easy run, should you just try it on practice runs, or should you just maybe just do that?
I mean, sometimes in the summer I will use a Timex just so that I go by feel, because I can't hit a pace. I don't know what pace I'm hitting when I have a watch on. So I'll say, you know what, if I want to do moderate, I'm just going to try to do real moderate. And then I use a Timex. But I'm also well versed at using a Timex. Like you probably do need to get used to it if you haven't used it before. But I ran for 10 years with a Timex, so I'm used to it. But yeah, try it. Some people do. Like I know one of my runners told me that she does no tech Tuesday, and she does no tech on Tuesday. So I am fine with that. Like I don't need to know your data every single day. In fact, I encourage people to do that sometimes. Just put it in. I used to coach without any data, and people still were successful. So it's not like I need all of the data to make you guys successful. But yeah, try it. It's kind of liberating, actually. I might. Maybe. Maybe I will.
Yeah. I really like knowing my sleep though. So as long as I'm putting my watch back on after the run, maybe.
Yeah. See, I don't wear my watch at night because of my sleep. But hey, that's cool that you can do that. I'm proud of you. I cannot. I'm like, would wake up in the morning and be like, what's my sleep score?
Yeah.
And then if it was bad, I would be like, panic. Oh no. Because I've read all the books on
Right.
sleep and what sleep does to you if you don't get enough sleep. And I'm like, oh, now I got something else to worry about. It's not a good look.
Well, data is there. What did we say? That data is a tool. It should
Yep,
not take
all of
over. It should not take over your life. It should not,
Yeah, and we're all looking for that real simple, like, this is how you do it, right? People want me to say it all the time. Coach, what is my pace? Well, it's not always, even your easy run pace can change based on the day, based on the weather, based on how tired you are. Like, I'm never going to be the person that's going to be like, do it this way. There's many ways to do it. So just try to use all the tools in the toolbox. That's the cool part. We have so many tools now. And if you use them all, it makes it fun and entertaining and different, right?
All right. And we're all running for fun.
Yeah.
All right.
You are running for fun.
We are running for fun with all of our data. Thank you guys. Well, we were going to see you on Sunday. We'll continue to
figure something out.
Out. And everybody has to pivot when there's hurricanes, and that's
Pivot.
What we're pivot. We're all pivoting. All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.